Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for patiently waiting. I think this patience is worth that wait. We are privileged and honored to have Shri Jayant Sinha with us, the Member of Parliament from Hazaribagh. On behalf of XLRI, I would like to thank Father Director, Dean Professor Patro, Father Donald for arranging us and supporting this, and thanks a ton to Shri Sinha ji for taking out time. It's been a very busy day for him, starting with events in Hazaribagh, starting with events in Ramgarh, and then coming to Jamshedpur for interaction with our community here. As I speak, I'm lost for words because it's not often that you have to introduce someone, you have the privilege of meeting someone who is so well accomplished professionally, academically, socially, politically, because the combination of all of that we have in Shri Sinha, it's rare to find. So I have in front of me some specifics about his achievements. So now you would know that he has been a Member of Parliament from Hazaribagh for last 2 Lok Sabha terms, and the last time he won in 2019 was by record margin of close to 5 lakh votes, sort of a 5 lakh vote winning. It would be among the highest in the country. Then right now he is the Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, and as in that role he leads 31-member parliamentary panel that has oversight on Ministry of Finance, Corporate Affairs, Statistics and Program Implementation, and the Niti Aayog. And he has a meeting lined up on Monday. Then in 2021 budget session, just last year, he introduced a private bill in the Lok Sabha, and that bill was on climate change and net zero carbon. And that is the theme of the topic for today, on which he will share his insights. And what better occasion to have a discussion on net zero targets in the week when we are having the COP27 in Egypt. So that coincides well with the timing. Now if I were to talk about his executive achievements, from 2014 to 19 he was first Minister of State for Finance and then Minister of State for Civil Aviation. So everything you see almost on the basis of Udan, for example, the things that you might be more familiar with, all the smaller airport connectivity. That has been the brainchild of Shri Sinha. Then everything you're seeing on drones, especially folks who were here earlier yesterday for the session by Shri Amba Dubey, you would know the tremendous progress India is now making on drones. Again, that foresight was provided by Shri Sinha. Now if I were to talk about his professional achievements, a lot has been shared, but before he came into the politics, about 10 years back, he had more than 2 decades of experience with Omidyar Network. He is the managing director of Omidyar Network India, and as part of that, he led the overall investment strategy and operations in India from 2009 and 13. Now you might know of 2 firms, Quicker and Daily Hunt, which are unicorns today. And these firms' investment strategy was led by Shri Sinha. Before joining that, he was the managing director of Courage Capital Management, Impact Investment. Things that you are now reading about in your colleges, textbook, he had been that. And before doing that, before joining Courage Capital in 2006, he spent 12 years in McKinsey, where he was also a partner. So before he left McKinsey to join Courage Capital. As part of the academic achievements, if I have to say, a graduate chemical engineer from IIT Delhi, who went there to pursue a master's in energy management and policy from the University of Pennsylvania, and then received an MBA from Harvard Business School. So, best of all worlds. And then he is a prolific writer. So he has continued to remain in touch with his writing and academic, and his writings have appeared in Financial Times, Times of India, Economic Times, Business Standard, Harvard Business Review, and McKinsey Quarterly. So, again, as I mentioned, I lost my words to say the professional achievement, professional accomplishment, social achievements, political accomplishment, and academic accomplishment. So, it's a privilege, sir, to have you with us. Thank you so much for sparing time. I know it's been a challenge day, but I think the students are ready with the questions, the students are ready with the insight, and I think we'll all look forward to learning a lot from you. And I would want to invite now Professor Patro to welcome Shri Sinha.
Good evening, welcome Sri Jayant Sinha, MP and Chairman of the Parliamentary Commission. Kalyan, you have introduced, the entire achievements and in 59 years of Mr. Sinha's life, all the major achievements have been very well summed up in 3 minutes time. I will just take 1 minute to, I don't want to stay in between Mr. Sinha and all of you. I will just take a minute to introduce XLRI to Mr. Sinha. We started in 1949 with the objective of professionalizing management in the country within years of India's independence, much before the IIMs were conceived of. At the invitation of the Tata Steel and the other industrial network from Jamshedpur, this institute was set up. From 1954, we were offering the HRM program. 1965, the MBA program, BM programs were launched. And I think it was over 4 or 5 years back, I had the privilege of listening to Mr. Sinha in Tata Auditorium. I think he spoke for about 1 hour and the spellbound. I can still recall the impact it had on the entire audience. And before that, maybe around 2001 or 2, we had the privilege of listening to his father, Mr. Chairperson Sinha, who was an IS topper, who was a minister of finance, in the same place. So I think leading people and inspiring the citizens of the country seems to be, in the blood of the Mr. Sinha's family. And thank you so much for being here. XLRI has taken certain leaps in terms of having, polar panels to help to ensure that it acts as a demonstration, small demonstration unit for everyone in XLRI. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. I welcome you once again to XLRI. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kalyanji and Father. It's always a pleasure to be here at XLRI. As you just heard, I was here some 4 or 5 years ago. I had a very interesting and very engaging session with students then. And so when Kalyanji requested me to come again, even though I had a long day and a packed schedule, I said with great pleasure, I'll come and join you and I'll talk about something that I have been working on for a number of years and which I'm quite passionate about. So I have no sort of shortage of energy when it comes to discussing these topics, but to be here in the room with all of you and to be able to share my thoughts on these topics just provides me with more energy and more excitement to talk to you all about it. So yes, we are going to talk about net zero. We are going to talk about climate change. But I want to talk about a topic even bigger than that. Something that goes to the heart of what should India be doing over the next 20 or 30 years. Because even as we pursue a net zero development model, we also have to think about how India itself develops. And so for many years, first as a management consultant, then as an investor, and then as a public servant, I have been thinking about what is the right development model for India. It's not an abstract question. This is a very serious question that determines the way your lives are going to be led. It determines the kinds of careers that you should follow. And not just for all of you, we are very privileged to be in a fantastic institution like XLRI. So it's not just about you, it's about the hundreds of millions of young people that are coming into the workforce right now and really coming up with an answer that makes sense for them and leads them to the path of sustainable prosperity. That really is what getting to the green frontier is about. How does India and the people of India get onto a pathway, a trajectory that leads us to sustainable prosperity? And that's what I want to share with you. Now, I'm sure all of you have taken Economics 101. Has everyone taken Economics? Yes. Right? So I'm sure it's a mandatory course even for people who have not done economics before. I was an engineer when I went to business school, so I took economics for the first time when I went to business school as well. But everybody studies economics. And there is a very large branch of economic thinking which is called development economics. And in development economics, the question is, how do countries develop? Kalyan, how do countries become prosperous? And I don't know if there are any professional economists in the room. Are there any professors of economics here, sitting here? No? Well, I don't want to be harsh with them. But every economist will tell you that there is one development model. And that development model, and in fact right here in Jamshedpur, we have a perfect example of that development model. And that development model is farm to factory. Farm to factory. Think of Jamshedpur. Farm to factory. Big factory, Tata Steel. And there are two vectors that drive that development model. Industrialization and urbanization. Again, as I said, Jamshedpur is a perfect example of that development model. Industrialization and urbanization. Get people out of the rice fields next to the Subarnarekha River, bring them into the Tata Steel plant, and lo and behold, you have development. And here, of course, I have a picture of Chinese people. And here you can see Chinese people working in a paddy field, and from the paddy field they go work in a textile factory, and that is the way all countries have developed. Whether it's the UK, which led the Industrial Revolution, whether it's the US, it's Germany, Japan, Korea, and of course most recently China. That is the development model. All economists will tell you that's the theory. Farm to factory. Farm to factory. From the धान की खेती और सुवर्णरेखा नदी के किनारे तो आप जाकर टाटा स्टील के कारखाने में आप काम कर रहे हैं. Farm to factory. That is the theory. Now, of course, as a former consultant, I have to come up with some kind of a chart and some kind of abstraction of this, right? And as a McKinsey consultant, of course, I have to come up with some kind of framework for this. So the framework is, let's think about the planet on the one hand, one dimension, on the y-axis, and let's think about people on the x-axis. And people, of course, what do they care about? They care about jobs, first and foremost. I want a good job. All of you are thinking, XLRI खत्म करो यार, बढ़िया सी नौकरी, और नौकरी में फिर उसका लोग अखबार में निकालेंगे फलाने को इतने लाखों की नौकरी मिली, right? So jobs, good jobs. Everybody wants a good job. Good jobs, wealth, GDP. That's what everybody wants. At the same time, we also have to think about what's happening to the planet in terms of the carrying capacity of the planet. And so the way we have to understand this is that there is the farm. The farm has a certain sort of jobs, wealth creation potential. And of course, it has a certain impact on the environment. And if you're going to take people from the farm, what takes them out of the farm? What's the vector taking them out of the farm? It's technology, which leads to industrialization and urbanization. And production is what we can make given the state of technology that we have. अगर आप धान की खेती कर रहे हैं और धान की खेती में जो आप जमीन को कोड़ रहे हैं वो गाय के द्वारा आप कोड़ रहे हैं और फिर धान की कटनी जो है वो भी कटने के लिए आप बस काट रहे हैं, तो वही आपकी टेक्नोलॉजी है. उतना ही आप धान की खेती करिएगा, उससे ज़्यादा आप नहीं कर सकते. But once I can give you more technology and I can urbanize, I can extract the iron ore out of the Chota Nagpur plateau, the iron ore, and I can put it into a blast furnace and fire it up, and I can make steel out of it. I've used that technology and I've gone from farm to factory. And through industrialization and urbanization, the theory is not only is this planet going to be better off, but people are going to be better off. So the direction of travel on this vector is 45 degrees, everybody's better off. That's the theory. Now, unfortunately, the theory and reality are not the same. Theory and reality are not the same. What is actually happening, rather than the vector pointing at a 45-degree angle, we have the vector pointing downwards. And as a result of that, we are on a pathway right now, which you all understand very well, which is not sustainable. I said sustainable prosperity. हमें जो चाहिए वो समृद्धि, सबके लिए समृद्धि हमें चाहिए. लेकिन आज वो sustainable prosperity हम लोगों को नहीं मिलती. पहली बात में, I will speak to you about pandemics. I will talk to you about coronavirus. Do you know what the economic impact of the coronavirus has been, friends? Anybody wants to hazard a number? What is the economic impact of the coronavirus? What is global GDP? Anybody hazard a guess? Global GDP, anyone? $90 trillion? Absolutely right. Do you know what the economists are saying has been the cost of the coronavirus? If the world GDP is $90 trillion, do you know what the cost of it has been? Somewhere between $5 to $10 trillion. That's the cost of this pandemic, and untold millions of lives lost. Untold millions of lives lost. $5 to $10 trillion. Real cost. All of us will fail. And how did the pandemic happen? It's a sustainability problem, folks. Right? We had a virus that was in a bat, most people believe. Right? It was in a bat. And it went from the bad, it crossed over. People think it was a wet market in Wuhan. And from that wet market in Wuhan, it came into human beings. Right? You heard the theory. There's a lab theory as well, but the main theory is that it was a bad. Now this is what's called a zoonotic spillover. A zoonotic spillover. A zoonotic spillover happens when a virus goes from an animal into a human being. A zoonotic spillover. Why does that happen? That's because you are encroaching in the habitat of those animals. Why are people engaging with bats in the first place if they are in some cave somewhere? Right? So as we encroach on natural habitats, we are creating these sustainability issues, these sustainability questions, and there is a very good case to be made that this pandemic itself is a sustainability question because of these kinds of zoonotic spillovers. By the way, that's where AIDS came from. Right? So that we know how AIDS came as well. AIDS was in chimpanzees in West Africa. And that's how it came into human beings, because we were encroaching in their habitat. So this is a, pandemics are a sustainability question, folks. And then of course climate change, which I will talk about it later. But you know about water shortages. You know about congestion, traffic. You know about air pollution in Delhi. Delhi, the gas chamber. Air quality, 400, 500 AQI. WHO says what? 40, 50. We have 500 in Delhi. Air pollution. And then insufficient job creation. That's why I said this is not something abstract. This is your life today. Traffic, air pollution, coronavirus, and these issues you're dealing with every day. These are your everyday issues. So are we on a trajectory? If the theory was that farm to factory is the way to go, if that was the theory, is farm to factory working for us? Is it leading us to sustainable prosperity for India? I don't think so. And we've got to really think about this. Now let's look at what's happening to carbon emissions. You may have seen this chart. This has been carbon emissions for centuries and centuries and centuries. Post-industrialization, look at what is happening to carbon emission levels. The carbon in the atmosphere now is at 422 parts per million. This is a number that we have not seen, folks, 250,000 years. Were you around 250,000 years ago? I was. So we have carbon levels in our atmosphere, 422 parts per million. Those of us who are scientists and engineers recognize that this is like a serious, serious outlier. 422 parts per million. That's where we are. And the latest predictions are that we are going to go from 0.5 degrees centigrade in 1950 going up to about 1.5 degrees. Now that people are saying there's a better than 10 to 20% probability that by 2030 we're going to cross the Paris limit of 1.5 degrees centigrade to now, and of course I'm going to Egypt to Sharm el Sheikh, so I have been tracking these numbers very closely, to now people saying that under current policies, we are headed to how much, folks? Have you seen the number? 2.8 degrees centigrade. Now again, you're MBA students, so you get the idea of a gradient. In 220 years, we have increased our temperatures by 1.1 degrees centigrade. Now in the next 80 years, we're going to increase that by another 1.5 degrees centigrade, 1.7 degrees centigrade. We're going to go 2.8. So 1.7 over 80 versus 1.1 over 220. What is happening to the slope? So temperature change is accelerating. As you put more and more and more carbon into the atmosphere, temperature change is accelerating. This is serious, folks. This is not about something 200 years from now. This is not about some abstract thing that you read about in a newspaper or in a magazine, or somebody comes and bores you on a Friday evening. Saturday. Is it Saturday? Yeah, Saturday. Friday. Somebody bores you on a Friday evening and like, yeah, chalo yaar, party karo yaar, kya bore kar raha hai. No, this is actually real things. And therefore, with this kind of carbon emissions going in, somewhere between 2.5 to 2.9 degrees centigrade, people are saying 2.8 degrees centigrade is where we are headed. And it's not happening, folks. Remember the famous, let's get to net zero by 2050? Not happening. Not happening. And this is a problem for you guys. I'm 60 almost. I'm going to be gone. You have 40, 50 years ahead of you. What is your world going to be like at 2.8 degrees centigrade? let me tell you, we are facing some major climate tipping points. People are saying we are already triggering tipping points at 1.1 degrees centigrade. What happens when you go to 2.8? There are 5 major tipping points that scientists are tracking, and they are really scared about it. Obviously, the melting of the ice sheets in the Antarctic and the Arctic, coral reef die-off. Has anyone been coral scuba diving? Has anyone gone to Maldives or any of these places? If you go to the Maldives now, and I went recently, and I tried to go scuba diving or just snorkeling, there is nothing to see. All the corals are dead. The corals are gone. Temperature in the ocean water has gone up by 2 degrees centigrade. The corals have died. The Great Barrier Reef, folks, if you get a chance, it's on your bucket list, please go. छुट्टी लीजिए, जैसे आपका MBA खत्म होगा, छुट्टी लेके ग्रेट बैरियर रीफ ले जाइए आप. बचा हुआ है अभी तक देखने लायक. क्योंकि भगवान जाने 10-20 साल के बाद क्या होगा, ग्रेट बैरियर रीफ आपका चला जाएगा. Atlantic current collapse. You know what keeps the UK warm? Are the Atlantic currents. Now, because ocean temperatures are changing, it's quite possible that that current will collapse, and we don't know what's going to happen to temperatures over there. We have no idea what's going to happen. Glacial melting. Now, let me tell you a story of glacial melting. So we had very warm temperatures in April and May of this year. Remember, it was 45 degrees in April, May. Jamshedpur बड़ी गर्मी हो गई. हमें क्या फर्क पड़ता है? क्या प्रॉब्लम? हम लोग जून में अगर 45 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड एसी चला ही देते हैं, तो अप्रैल में चला देंगे. हम लोग को क्या फर्क पड़ा? चला दिया हमने 45 डिग्री पे एसी, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं. लेकिन ये किसी ने सोचा नहीं, किसी ने हिसाब नहीं लिया इसका कि even as it was getting to be 45 degrees in April and May, we were starting to have unprecedented levels of glacial melting. Unprecedented levels of glacial melting. So our Himalayan rivers were already quite full in April and May because we were getting this massive amount of glacial melting in April and May. We had a pretty weak monsoon in India. We had a deficient monsoon in India. So it actually didn't impact us that much because even though the rivers were full, we didn't have a very excessive monsoon. That was not the case in Pakistan. What happened in Pakistan? The Indus was in state. The Indus was full because of this massive amount of glacial discharge. Baluchistan and Sindh had massive, unprecedented 5x, 6x monsoon rainfall. 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. Thousands of people have lost their lives. People have estimated damage at $30-40 billion. And people believe that this has set Pakistan back by at least a few years in terms of growth. I said this is real, folks. Real. This is what's happening because of glacial melting. We didn't anticipate it because we can't anticipate all the different things that are going to happen to the climate. And then of course permafrost. You know where the permafrost is? It's in Canada, it's in Russia. The permafrost has huge amounts of carbon trapped into it. Once the permafrost melts, the carbon will get released and we will have a situation where we could have even further runaway temperature increases. हमें पता ही नहीं कितना बड़ा temperature increases की कारण होगा. लेकिन ये सब climate tipping points जो हैं, लोग कह रहे हैं कि 1.1 पे ही इसका impact आने वाला है. 2.5, 2.8 पे क्या होगा? इन सब चीजों का क्या इंटरैक्शन होगा? कैटेक्लिस्मिक क्लाइमेट चेंज होगा? हमें कुछ पता ही नहीं. We don't know. Frankly, this is beyond where our models can tell us. This is not anything abstract. Please open the newspaper, read it, see what climate scientists are telling you. This is your life. I'm going to tell you about your life. So what does that mean even for India? For India, we are in a situation where we're going to see many more extreme weather events. We are already seeing heat waves, drought, lots of coastal flooding. I have actually looked at Jharkhand rainfall over the last 10 years compared to decades before that. And what we are watching is that rainfall in Jharkhand alone, in Jamshedpur, has a lot more variability in the last decade than it has in the past. So clearly, we are creating these unstable weather patterns. Heat wave I've already spoken about. This is what the picture looked like in April. This kind of heat wave. Air temperatures recorded in April 46 degrees centigrade in Rajasthan. Now here's a chart that people don't see this often. Coastal flooding. So you know what's happening is that the sea levels are rising. As the ice sheets are melting, sea level is rising. Most predictions are somewhere between 0.5 to 0.8 meters. Sea level rise. Cyclones are becoming more frequent because there's more energy in our oceans because of the warming of the ocean water. There's more energy there. So our cyclones are becoming more ferocious, as you've just seen Hurricane Ian, for example. We usually have cyclones in the Bay of Bengal. We rarely have it in the Arabian Sea, but now we're starting to get cyclones in the Arabian Sea as well. So the prediction is sea level rises by 0.5 meters. Then we get these cyclones coming in. Seawater surges 2 meters to 3 meters. What happens next? Our coastal cities are flooded. This is Mumbai, Kochi, Sundarbans, which is capital. Flooding, salt water coming in. Folks, I would not be long Mumbai real estate. I won't be long Mumbai real estate. As you decide where you want to buy an apartment, where you want to buy a flat, I'm not sure I'd buy it in Mumbai. Or even for that matter in Calcutta. Because there's a very serious risk of this kind of coastal flooding happening in Mumbai. So we have to think through all of what is going on. Now let's look at agriculture. All the estimates are that our agricultural productivity, given these heat waves, given drought conditions, extreme weather events, are also going to be down very significantly. 20% of rural districts. This time in drought, for example, in Jharkhand, virtually every block in Jharkhand has already been notified as a drought affected district. So droughts are going to be harder, much more prevalent, and crop harvests are going to drop. Real life things that are happening just now. Even. So what is happening in India? So we've actually done a tremendous amount of modeling of this. When I started working on this 3 years ago, we really didn't have high quality models for India in terms of carbon emissions and what it meant for our economy. And because I was very interested in development and what was happening to our GDP, I wanted to look at what the impact of climate change was going to be on India. And first what we looked at was what was going to happen to India's carbon emissions under a baseline business as usual reference standard. Now even as the world is going to net zero, India is going to continue to increase emissions. We are digging out more coal in the ground and Hazaribagh में हम लोग कर रहे हैं, चतरा में कर रहे हैं. खूब जमीन से कोयला हम लोग निकाल रहे हैं, कोयले के हम लोग पावर प्लांट बना रहे हैं और कोयला हम लोग जला के अपने वातावरण में हम लोग भेज रहे हैं. तो बिजनेस एज यूजुअल सिनेरियो में आप देखिए कि उसमें कार्बन एमिशंस बढ़ते चले जाते हैं. नाउ if we have to get to what Honorable Prime Minister Sahab has said, net zero by 2070, the implication, folks, is we've got to change now. If we don't get on this trajectory, this net zero 2070 trajectory, this green line, if we don't start making changes now, we are never going to be able to get to net zero. We can't get there by 2070. It's not possible. Trust me, I have run the models. We've got to start now. We've got to start as soon as you guys graduate from business school. You've got to start to think about how do we get to net zero. Because we can't wait. It's a question of stranded assets. If we're going to put up power plants that are going to run for 40, 50 years, we're going to put up blast furnaces that are, I'm told, even 100 years old. And those blast furnaces are using coking coal. What's going to happen? We're going to pump more and more carbon into the atmosphere, which is going to result in all the terrible things that I just spoke about. So it's now. We've got to focus on it now. That's climate change. Now, I want to switch from climate change and I want to talk about Bhola Mehto. Bhola Mehto is one of my voters in this area. मैंने कहा कि क्लाइमेट चेंज तो हम लोगों को दिक्कत हो ही रही है, लेकिन एक और हम लोगों की बहुत बड़ी समस्या, चुनौती हम लोगों के सामने है, वो कि हम लोग बढ़िया से बढ़िया रोजगार उनको कैसे दें. और अगर आप भोला महतो से पूछिए कि भाई आपको चाहिए क्या, वो बोलेगा यार मुझे अच्छी नौकरी चाहिए और मुझे किसी ढाबा में या कंस्ट्रक्शन साइट में नौकरी नहीं चाहिए. आप ढाबे में मुझे मत डालिए, मुझे आप सरकारी नौकरी दीजिए, बढ़िया से मैं बैठा हूँ सरकारी नौकरी, या आप उनको बैंगलोर में बढ़िया से कोई IT सर्विसेज की नौकरी दीजिए, एसी कमरे में बैठे जैसे आप लोग बैठे हुए एसी में बढ़िया आपकी नौकरी चल रही, वो भी भोला महतो भी ऐसी नौकरी चल रही. अब हम लोग भोला महतो की नौकरी ऐसे हम लोग बना पा रहे हैं. This is a little hard because the colors don't have to come through well. But today, organized sector jobs in India are only 500 million, 50 total number of jobs in India are 500 million, of which 400 million is in the informal sector, in dhabas, construction sites and so on. Only 35 million is in government and only 65 million or so, totally 100 million, 20% of the jobs are in the formal sector. तो सब लोग, अगर आप झारखंड में किसी से भी पूछे कि आपको नौकरी कौन सी चाहिए, सब लोग बोले हमें सरकारी नौकरी चाहिए। क्यों नहीं? सबसे आपसे भी पूछेंगे, कई लोग, आप लोग भी कहिए कि हमको सरकारी नौकरी चाहिए। क्यों भाई? परमानेंट है सर, सर्विस है, बढ़िया है। लेकिन सरकारी नौकरी तो सिर्फ 3.5 करोड़ है, और कितने लोग, अभी तो 20-25 करोड़ लोग तो हम लोगों के वर्कफोर्स में आने वाले हैं अगले कुछ वर्षों में। तो सरकारी नौकरी उनको मिलेगी कैसे? और अगर उनको फॉर्मल ऐसी नौकरी जिसमें कि आपको हर महीने आपको तनख्वाह अच्छी तरीके से आपके बैंक के खाते में जाए, वैसी भी नौकरियां बहुत कम हैं। तो भोला महतो के लिए हम लोग नौकरी देने में भी हम लोगों को तकलीफ हो रही है, चुनौती है। तो हम लोग भोला महतो के लिए करें क्या? उनको बोल दें कि आप ऑटो रिक्शा चलाइए। आज वो अगर खेत में काम कर रहे हैं तो एवरेज जो उनकी कमाई होती है खेत में करीब 7,000 रुपए पर मंथ, उनकी तनख्वाह 7,000 रुपए। अगर वो जमशेदपुर आ जाते हैं और जमशेदपुर में किसी 3 व्हीलर को चलाते हैं, आपको यहाँ से आपको ट्रेन स्टेशन ले जा रहे हैं, आप निकलिए XLRI से, बोलिए मुझे ट्रेन स्टेशन ले चलिए, मैं कलकत्ते जाना चाहता हूँ, मैं दिल्ली जाना चाहता हूँ, तो आपको ट्रेन स्टेशन ले जाएंगे, उनकी कमाई कितनी होगी? भोला महतो जी की 15,000। और ये जो ऑटो रिक्शा में बैठे हैं, तो पेट्रोल वाला ऑटो रिक्शा, ये तो और कार्बन आपके एटमॉस्फेयर में डाल रहे हैं। तो इसका क्या मतलब? अगर हम भोला महतो को सिर्फ इस किस्म की अगर हम लोग ग्राउंड जॉब ही दें, तो वी आर ऑन द करंट पाथ। दिस इज नॉट सस्टेनेबल प्रॉस्पेरिटी। हाउ आर वी गिविंग भोला महतो सस्टेनेबल प्रॉस्पेरिटी? If all we are going to do is put him in an auto rickshaw and say 15,000 रुपए की नौकरी, have you, because you are going to be the custodians of India going forward, you have to create these jobs. What are you going to do? Create a job for Bhola Mahto as an auto rickshaw driver? No. What you have to do, because of these climate change and these sustainability issues, we have to create an innovation-driven formal job for Bhola Mahto. यानी ऑटो रिक्शा में नहीं, आपको as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, आपको ऐसी नौकरियां खड़ी करनी पड़ेगी जिसमें उसको एक ग्रीन जॉब, नॉट अ ब्राउन जॉब, ग्रीन जॉब, और ग्रीन जॉब में उसकी अच्छी तनख्वाह उसको मिल रही है, 30,000 रुपए उसको मिले। Only then can we talk about sustainable prosperity for Bhola Mahto. क्यों? ठीक बोल रहे हैं? That's how we have to think about it. Which means, again, coming back to my framework, instead of being on this current path, which is not sustainable, which is the business as usual development model, the farm to factory development model, we need a different development model. We need a farm to frontier development model, as I call it, farm to green frontier development model, one that genuinely improves the carrying capacity of our planet and genuinely gives a Bhola Mahto a better job. That's the development model we need for India. That is the development model that will bring us sustainable prosperity. जो हम आज के समय जिस रास्ते पे हैं, वो रास्ता हम लोगों को कहीं नहीं जा रहा है, हमें दूसरे रास्ते पे जाना है. We need a different development path. And that's what I call my green frontier development model. And the green frontier development model combines two very important vectors, not industrialization and urbanization. It has two important vectors, digitization and decarbonization. Not industrialization and urbanization, but digitization and decarbonization. So Bhola Mahto, I will tell you in a second what he does, but we've got to take our electricity grid, we've got to flip it over to renewables, we've got to take all of our transportation, make it electric, we've got to massively scale up new alternative technologies like green hydrogen, nuclear fusion, biofuels, and we've got to have a carbon trading system so we can bring down carbon emissions. This is the green frontier development model. Decarbonization is development. Development is decarbonization. So what does that mean? That means instead of taking Bhola Mahto and putting him in an auto rickshaw, let's take Bhola Mahto and let's put him in an electric vehicle. How many of you have been to Delhi and seen Blue Smart? Blue Smart is an all-electric ride-hailing business model, where the drivers are not gig drivers, they don't have a gig job, they are employees of Blue Smart, they are being paid 30,000 rupees a month. That's the kind of job. Blue Smart is a green frontier company. Blue Smart is a green frontier company. And there are many such companies. This is Blue Smart. You can see it's a green frontier company. We have Electric Pay that's doing a charging network. We have Chai Point, we have NutriFresh, Idea Forge, the drone company that we spoke about earlier. We have to build these green frontier companies. We have to build these disruptive companies where decarbonization is at the heart of their business model. Decarbonization is not ESG. ESG is an add-on. Decarbonization is at the heart of the business model. When we do that, this is not impact investing, this is investing. And I've been an impact investor for many years. This is not impact investing. This is not ESG. This is your business model. This is investing. This is decarbonization, is development. That's the path that we have to be on. And net zero is net positive. This is my big headline. This is my big headline. Net zero is net positive. What we have found is that when we have run all of the analysis, we find that net zero is in fact net positive. When we take the business as usual case and we run net zero cases against it, we find in every case, when we go on a net zero trajectory, the sustainable prosperity trajectory, we have more GDP growth, not less. We have more GDP growth. We create more jobs, more people get employed, we create more green jobs than in the current GDP development paradigm. We also, very importantly, have fewer lives lost because of air pollution. 60-70% of air pollution is because of fossil fuels. You get rid of fossil fuels, you get rid of 60-70% of air pollution. No diesel, no petrol, no coal, no gas. Gone. Air is cleaner. Even Jamshedpur, as I came in, the air today was horrible. I haven't looked at AQI. If somebody can look at Jamshedpur's AQI, I'm not sure it will be very good. But let's get clean air, folks. And do you know how much money we are spending on fossil fuel imports? Crude oil, gas, coal. We are spending $250 billion a year importing fossil fuels. India's total import bill, folks, is $600 billion a year. $600 billion a year, of which $250 billion a year is just fossil fuels. And if we continue at the rate that we're on, we're going to be importing $1 trillion of fossil fuels. You are going to be working in IT services companies, you are going to be working in export companies, so you can pay for your fossil fuel handling. You. Those of you who work for big export companies, you know, like a pharma company or a Infosys or a TCS or a Wipro, will be exporting so we can pay for our fossil fuels. So if we can replace our fossil fuels, move towards the green frontier, digitization and decarbonization, we are going to be in a situation where we can save literally $1 trillion a year of fossil fuel. And that's what I mean by green frontier development. Bhola Mehto, I don't just have to put him in a blue smart electric vehicle. I can put him on a dairy farm, give him the most modern technology and use technology to help. Pay him through UPI, give him good high quality food processing so he can make ice cream for you. He's not just selling milk, he's actually making ice cream. But it's not just about Bhola Mehto, it's about Geeta Oraon too. I have to create a good job for Geeta Oraon as well. So why not something like a NutriFresh? I don't know if you all know about NutriFresh. Hydroponic farming only employs women doing a fabulous job. So this is where decarbonization, sustainability is at the heart of your business model. Those companies are there. They are going to drive this green frontier development. But now we come to the rub. Now we come to the real challenge. The real challenge is we need a lot of money for this kind of development. It's self-evident, now putting my economist hat on, it's self-evident that if you invest a lot of money in more efficient technologies, you're going to have higher GDP growth. It's self-evident, it's obvious. That's why we did digital, right? We went from analog to digital. Nobody goes into a bank and is filling out slips. Everybody goes and does everything digitally now. So we moved from analog to digital, and that's made us more productive. Technology. In the same way, moving from brown to green makes us more productive, but it requires investment. And folks, as I was saying right at the beginning of this presentation, we are running out of time. We can't wait for this to happen slowly. We can't wait for 60 or 70 years to move to green. We need to do it in the next 20 or 30 years. We need a lot of money to do it. A lot of money. And the models are telling us we need to spend about $100 billion a year more. $100 billion a year. Total corporate investment in India right now is $100 billion a year. Total FPI plus FDI in India is $100 billion a year. Now we are saying add another $100 billion. Where is it going to come from? Are we saving enough? Now I've got my chairman of standing committee on finance center. Are we saving enough to be able to plow it back into taking the blast furnace that Tata Steel has here and replacing it with the green hydrogen blast furnace? Do we have enough capital? Do we have enough capital at the right price to do it? The answer is no. And so, because it's Friday evening, you want to have a little fun, here's something that I'm sure you all know. How many of you seen Jerry Maguire, the movie? Show of hands. Jerry Maguire. Those of you who've seen Jerry Maguire will remember this scene. Can you hear the volume?
Show you the money. That's not so good. Show me the money. Show me the money. Yeah. Show me the money. That's it. That's it. Show me the money. I need to feel you, Jerry. Show me the money. Jerry, buddy, yo. Show me the money.
That's what it's about. It's about show me the money. We don't have the money. Show me the money. So we need the money. The money has to come from the global north. $100 billion a year is already coming from the global north through FDI and FDI into India. That's what's paying for your jobs, folks. If we need to put another $100 billion a year into our Indian economy, we are going to have to, and it's not just India, this is the global south. The global south is going to account for the vast percentage, 70-80% of emissions going forward. But the global south is capital starved, capital deficient. We don't have the domestic savings. We don't have the financial systems that will enable us to generate 100% more investment dollars. We don't. So we need the money. We need the money from the global north. And that's what the global south is telling the global north. Show me the money. Show me the money. And it has to be a market-driven approach. This is not about the US government giving money to India. This is not about the EU giving money to India. This is about Texas teachers investing in Tata Steel so that they build a green hydrogen-driven blast furnace. So it's a market-driven approach. We need investors. We need people to invest in our economy, invest it on this decarbonization, net zero trajectory, so we can become sustainable and we can have a green economy. But it is all about show me the money. Without the money, it's not happening. And as an investor, I can tell you a lot of people are cynical. Well, give me projects, give me this, give me... No, show me the money. You turn up with a checkbook, everybody in XLRI will be. They'll say, oh, I got a 25 lakh job after I graduated from XLRI at this company, which is paying me this much money to do green hydrogen. Then somebody will get a 40 lakh job and it will be advertised, 40 lakh job from XLRI to do green hydrogen. Show me the money. People go to where the money is, where the opportunity is. So we've got to find ways of getting these investment flows into the global south, into these funds, into our companies so that they can actually decarbonize. And this is the opportunity we have, folks. I'm off to Egypt. I'm flying out 15th morning. 2 hops, Cairo, Sharm el-Sheikh. And what I'm going to be presenting is a global climate alliance. And the idea of the global climate alliance is show me the money. As simple as that. Which is a deal. A deal. A deal between the north and the south. The south says we will legally commit to net zero, which we haven't done so far. We've made a statement, but we've not legally committed. We haven't passed a law in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. I have drafted a private member bill to that effect, but we haven't passed a law saying we're going to net zero. But we will. But in return for that, you've got to show me the money. You give me the money, I'll commit to net zero, and that's what the Global Climate Alliance is. That's the report that we're releasing in Sharm el-Sheikh. I've written a number of articles about this already. We're releasing this in Sharm el-Sheikh, and then we're kicking off a very serious set of discussions through India's G20 presidency. This whole effort, this whole proposal has been done in collaboration with MIT, with the London School of Economics, with the DIW, which is a big economic think tank in Germany, with Tufts, and with a number of other research organizations, so that we have a robust proposal we can take into India's G20 presidency and save you guys. That's the work that we're doing, folks. really happy that I could be with you to share with you some of my thinking on this topic. I'm happy to take any questions you all might have about either green frontier development or any other topic that you're interested in. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Thank you very, very much.
Professor Patro mentioned about the audience being mesmerized last time Sri Sinha was here. Now I was not here that time, but I can admit that I am completely mesmerized, Sri Sinha. The way you have presented this, you have donned the hat of a professor, donned the hat of a consultant, and donned the hat of a policymaker to illustrate a complex topic like net zero. And
Kalyanji, you forgot the hat of an entertainer. You love that.
So my bad. So hat of entertainer also to come out with that movie clip at the very time you show me the movie clip. I think hats off. I think I have a number of questions in front of me. Some questions have come right now. We had asked the students to share some questions on the topic, and because you're talking about show me the money, I think let me start with some questions on the money. So do we have Suhas to ask questions about the flow of money from the global north and global south? Suhas, if you may. Karthik, can you please pass on the mic?
Hello. Yes. Thank you, sir, for the session. So my question is that there has been consistent talk about developed nations funding the sustainable efforts of the developing and least developed nations. How should such funding be calculated and distributed amongst the 100 plus developing and least developed nations?
There obviously is a massive requirement for money. The estimates right now are about $2 trillion a year. As I said, India itself requires about $100 billion a year, but when you add adaptation and mitigation, the estimates are that the global south requires about $2 trillion a year. The world requires $3 to $4 trillion a year. That's on a global GDP of 90 trillion. So we're talking about a global GDP of 90 trillion, and we're saying that about 3 to 4% of global GDP needs to be invested immediately in decarbonization and net zero. That's the kind of money we're talking about. These are very, very large numbers. As I said, India today, all of corporate capex, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Air India, Airtel, every company in India is investing in total about $100 billion. We are going to have to double that to get us on a net zero trajectory, right? And the vast majority of this is private sector investment. And that, of course, private sector investment happens through a variety of channels. It happens through the public markets, it happens through private equity, it happens through venture capital, it happens through debt, as well as equity, as well as mezzanine. So there are different instruments, different channels. Everything is going to have to be mobilized. Everything. Because we're going to have to double the investment levels that we have right now. Think about it this way. Just so you understand the magnitude of this. Every single car in India has to become an electric car. Every truck has to become an electric truck. Every motorcycle, there are 200 million two-wheelers, 300 million two-wheelers in India. Every one of them has to become electric. All our power plants have to be shut down. They all have to become solar plants, or wind, or offshore wind. Every steel company, every cement company, every fertilizer company, every industry has to change. This is a whole of the economy transformation, a massive transformation, and we can't do it, quickly. It will take us 30, 40 years to get there. But, and this is the punchline, folks, we have to start now. We have to start now. Otherwise, no Great Barrier Reef, otherwise no Maldives. You know what the average height of the Maldives Islands is? 150 centimeters, 1.5 centimeters. How much did the sea level rise? 0.5 to 0.8 meters. Storm surge, 2 to 3 meters. What happens to the Maldives? Gone. You play cricket against the West Indies, Barbados, gone. This is what we are confronting. It's an epic planetary crisis. This is the greatest crisis, nuclear weapons and now climate change. These are among the greatest crises that humanity has faced. That's what we're talking about. That's why the scale is so enormous.
So, do we have Pamni Sai Krishnamurthy here? Okay, so let me ask that question because you mentioned about electric vehicles. The question that has come up is, can electric vehicle be a long-term sustainable solution for India? Because the mining and disposal of battery waste is a challenge for India. So shouldn't India be looking at green hydrogen fuels and other alternatives instead of focusing too much on electric vehicles?
It's not either or. We need green hydrogen for certain kinds of transportation. So for trucks and planes, we will need green hydrogen, aviation fuel, replacement for heavy usage diesel. But two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, we can do electric vehicles. Yes, of course, there are challenges with recycling. We've got to make sure that from a total life cycle perspective, it's still net zero. All those things we're going to have to work on. But ultimately, that's the way we have to go. The European Union, for example, has already declared that by 2035, let me repeat, by 2035, the European Union has already said as part of their Fit for 55 program, all vehicles are going to be electric. So it's happening. Mercedes is going to do it, BMW is going to do it, Volkswagen is going to do it. All of these companies are going to do it because they are facing those regulatory restrictions on making ICE engines now.
Another question has come on what I would use the term hypocrisy of the West. So the questions, do we have Athar, Sandeep Kalitkar? Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and ask your question on this hypocrisy?
Yeah, so basically my
Please take a mic, Okay.
Yeah, so while EU nations are pushing for carbon neutrality even at the COP, I read that their coal usage as well as fossil fuel usage marginally increased this year because the energy security blanket came under a curve. So if these nations are showing some sort of complacency, then how does this fit in getting the developing nations?
So you're absolutely right. And everybody has to do what is required, the north as well as the south. But remember one thing, there is no planet B. Unless you plan to settle in Mars in the next 20 or 30 years, we are all here on planet Earth. So we all have to come up with a solution. There's no point pointing fingers. What we really need, as I said, is a global climate alliance. So we can say to the north, you have the capital, net zero is net positive, and it's better for us. It is better for us. You give us the capital, we'll do it. Right? So let's take a positive, constructive approach to this and let's get it done. Let's make your life better. It's as simple as that.
I think Aravind, you have an interesting question on energy security and national security. So Karthik, can you please pass on the mic to Aravind? Because he talks about this current trend of going back to coal in the post-Russian-Ukraine crisis. Nice.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming. So my question is that regarding energy security, our push towards EV, the first thing is that China controls nearly 85% of the earth minerals, and they are predominantly the most required minerals for battery technology. So that will be one problem. And the second problem is that because of the Russia-Ukraine war, as he mentioned, there have been reopening of coal power plants in France and many EU countries, and they are very dependent on Qatar for the CNG right now. So how can India, stem this tide? Only 24 countries are updated there nationally determined contributions.
I understand the issues. So as far as rare earth minerals are concerned, that is a statement about this moment. But the great thing about human beings, the great thing about technology is that it evolves and adapts. So there's tremendous effort underway in the West and in India to come up with other sources of rare earths, to come up for other sources for lithium. There's a big lithium mine being opened in Canada right now. So we will very quickly start to develop alternative sources, right? There's going to be recycling of many of these rare earth materials. There are many companies to be created, startups that are going to get created that are going to recycle all of these rare earth minerals. So we will find alternative sources. And the good thing about the Russia-Ukraine war in a way is that it's forced Europe to move even more quickly to alternative sources to green energy as well. So yes, of course there will be bumps along the road, we recognize that. But this is not a 1 year or 2 year journey that we're talking about. We're talking about a 30, 40, 50 year journey. But the point is, as I said, if I can pull the chart up, I'll show you. This is the part that you need to remember. This is the part you need. We are talking about a 30, 40 year journey, but we've got to start now. If we stay on this trajectory, we are never going to get there. we have to switch trajectories. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while. But the most important thing, as I'm saying, is we've got to switch trajectories. We are on a development trajectory, not just India, but the whole world. That is not sustainable. Do you like what we had to go through during the coronavirus? I mean, I was locked down for months on it. I'm sure all of you were as well. Many people's college education, many people's educational experience suffered. Lots of people lost their loved ones. That's all because we are not on a sustainable trajectory. We need a much, much more sustainable trajectory, and we need to get on it now. That's the point. Now again, it's going to take a 30, 40-year trajectory to get there, but we have to be thinking that. We've got to change our mindsets. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
You mentioned about you going to Sharm el Sheikh next week.
Yes.
And there's a question on the merits of such international conferences. Akshat, if you can go ahead and ask a question.
Hello. Yeah, good evening, sir. Thank you again for coming. Two quick questions, sir. So, the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015. It's been 7 years. And basically, the promises, these are commitments made by countries, 194 countries. If there are no checks and balances in place, are these conferences really relevant? What kind of checks and balances are there in place? Second quick question, sir, that the West uses India, China and these countries as their manufacturing hubs, while US has their carbon emissions, per capita carbon emissions almost double, triple of us. So how...
The actual numbers are, we are I think 2.4, they are 14.6. So it's not double, triple, we are 7.
It's more than that.
Yeah, but how does it matter? Let's go towards a common prosperity. We have a shared future. We have a shared planet. And with respect to your first question about hard commitments, that's what the Climate Alliance is for. When you have 193 parties, when you have a conference of parties that is includes the European Union, that's why it's not a conference of countries, it's called conference of parties because of that. There's 193 signatories to the Paris Agreement. It's very difficult to create a tough binding set of commitments when you've got 193 countries. Let's do a different type of climate alliance. Okay, that's why we are advocating, let's do it to the G20, which is the 20 major economies of the world that constitute about 80% of global emissions. Let them come up with binding hard commitments. Hard commitments, you give me the money, I'll sign a net zero pledge. A legally binding net zero pledge. Not 193 countries, nationally determined contributions, which is, it's a best efforts, voluntary type of arrangement. And for good reason. I wouldn't have signed something as a voluntary basis unless I was going to get something real. So that's what we are advocating with the Global Climate Alliance, is you give me the money, I'll sign something which is not voluntary but which is legally binding, a sovereign treaty. That's what's required right now. But we are all in it together. You reduce your carbon emissions. Most OECD-rich global north countries are on a trajectory where they will get to net zero by 2050. The US, by the way, is going to by 2035, I think, get down to about, will reduce it by 44% of their 2005 levels. The EU is committed right now by 2030 to bring down their carbon emissions by 55% relative to 2005 levels. So these folks, Canada, Australia, UK, Japan, have all passed laws saying net zero by 2050. So they are bringing it down, right? So let's not worry about it. What we need to do is think about the future. And for the future, yes, net zero is good for us. Net zero is net positive, right? But we need the capital. So show me the money. We'll sign it up. You give it to us. Let's move on. What's the point of finger pointing? Does it get you dollars? No, it doesn't. And it's important to have Sharm el Sheikh, COP27, because people come, they discuss, new ideas emerge, new thinking is presented, we build a consensus on what needs to happen. These things are important. I've been in many of them and I find them very valuable.
So now let's turn our attention to what India can do. So there are questions on the domestic priorities of the Indian government. So we have a question from Professor Tata of faculty. So if you can ask and go ahead and ask the question.
Thank you very much, sir. A wonderful presentation. My question is about agriculture contribute significantly to the GHG emissions. If India has to commit to net zero, we need to do a lot on the agriculture sector. It is more difficult than industry or addressing other forms. So what does the government of India has in mind? Or what are the
That's a very
strategies?
good point. You're absolutely right, Professor. The reality is that we are emitting right now about 3.5 billion tons a year. 3.5 billion tons of carbon emissions equivalent. Of the 3.5 billion tons, you should know, and Jharkhand is a prime contributor to that. 1 billion tons a year is just from coal-fired power plants. Coal is contributing to 1 billion tons a year of that. Why am I talking about coal when I talk about agriculture? Because agriculture is very difficult to deal with. It's lots and lots of distributed farmers, lots and lots of distributed technologies that they have to deal with. On the other hand, when we talk about coal and we talk about industry, it's much more concentrated, much easier to deal with that than I should deal with agriculture. So that's why, the charts that I've shown where it's very important for us to get on a trajectory now for 2070. Because agriculture is so hard, because it's going to take so much time to change people's agricultural practices, switch them over not to diesel tractors but to EV tractors, etc., etc. We need to do the coal and the industry part now. That's the much easier part to do now. But if we leave that for later, then tackling agriculture and tackling all of that will become too difficult. We will not be able to do it. So we have to do coal, we have to do industry now. That's the easier, more convenient way of dealing with it right now. We can get Tata Steel, we can get NTPC, but can we get the millions and millions of farmers around India? Much more. But agriculture and land use is about 1 billion tons as well. It's very difficult. It's going to take many decades to be able to reduce emissions.
I think we have a question now on carbon markets in India. So Vishal, if you can go ahead. So we are hearing a lot about carbon policy, carbon markets in India, carbon prices.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for such an informative session. So I wanted to know about the carbon market. So what has been the Indian government stance on the national carbon market and carbon trading? And as we know that the other countries have already taken a lead in carbon trading and carbon market. So how is India planning to catch them? And what are the certain challenges that can India face while launching such a national carbon market?
Well, I am not a member of the government. I am a legislator and I am a member of the ruling party, so I don't speak on behalf of the government. But I can tell you what government policy is. Government policy is to encourage the development of carbon markets and an emissions trading scheme. It has been introduced, the law has been passed in Parliament, and we are starting it in the industrial areas as a voluntary carbon market. And as I said in my Green Frontier development model, it's important to have a carbon market because, as I said, the easier transition is in the industrial and the power sector. And if we can create those carbon credits, and those are, high integrity, audited carbon credits, then we can trade them globally and get the benefit of that as well. So after all, again coming back to show me the money, if I have to invest $1 billion in reducing carbon emissions, why should I as an investor invest it in Jamshedpur? Why do I need to necessarily invest it in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, right? Why can't I do it in Jamshedpur if I have a good carbon market? So carbon markets for India are very important. They make a very big difference for us to attract investment.
So there's a question on the ministry, you were part of the civil aviation. There's a question by Devatika on flights, carbon emissions from flights.
Hello. Thank you, sir, for coming. My question is, the UN conference recently agreed on the net zero international flight goals. Do you think India, as a leader on climate change, can implement similar policies for domestic airline travel, especially considering the rapid growth in domestic air travel and the high carbon emission of air travel in general?
No, those are great questions. As somebody who's contributed to the rapid growth of air travel in India, I feel that responsibility keenly. The fact is that on a per kilometer basis, your carbon emissions from air travel are not that high. It's just that you're traveling a very long distance, so you generate a lot of carbon emissions. But just so you know, the cost per kilometer, the price you pay per kilometer on a plane is about 5 rupees. The price that you pay per kilometer on an auto rickshaw is about 10 rupees. So plane travel is very, very cost effective. Similarly, when you look at carbon emissions. However, we have to be able to, as air travel grows quickly in India, we have to be able to find alternative sources through which we can reduce carbon emissions. There is already a lot of work that's happening in biofuels, bioaviation fuels. There's a lot of work that's happening in green hydrogen and other areas. And the aviation industry also is committed to net zero by 2050. So that's Boeing and Airbus. So I'm sure because Boeing and Airbus are the leaders in aviation globally, they will find these biofuels and green hydrogen type solutions that we will be able to use in India as well. So I'm quite confident that will happen.
Now there are some questions which are aligned with the previous experience before joining the government and the legislative. Tejas, you have a question on impact investing.
Good evening, sir. Sir, so my question relates with impact investing, and you have been talking throughout this presentation about showing the money. So at one point of time, you were in control of money, you were the managing director of Air India. So how did you, when you were shown projects, because when you had the money, you must have been shown projects about impact investing. So what kind of, or how, what was your method in prioritizing which projects should be given money? And when we are asking the world for money to fund green projects in India, what will India's approach be about what type of project should?
Now you asked me a very profound question. And that profound question is, how do we think about impact investing? Let me give you the short answer, because obviously I've spent a lot of time as the head of a media in India and the founder of the Impact Investors Council in India and somebody who's spoken extensively about impact investing around the world. I've thought a great deal about it. The answer is as an impact investor, you should be, for each company that you're looking at, be going for the highest possible return. Okay? However, when you look at it at the portfolio level, there are many things you have to do as an impact investor, which means that if I'm Omedia, I am not going to generate the returns that Sequoia can. Because you have to do a number of things in terms of policy, you have to do a number of things in terms of your holding periods, there's a number of things you have to do in terms of supporting the industry that Sequoia will never do. So at a net portfolio level, your returns may be low. But when you look at a company, you need to be as disciplined as any commercial investor. And the reason is the following. There's not enough impact investment dollars in the world that will enable you to scale all the best companies in the world. There's not enough. So sooner or later, as an impact investor, you're going to have to get Sequoia and Axel into your company. And if you have a company which is sub-optimized with respect to returns and scalability and profitability, why is a Sequoia going to invest? Why is a SoftBank going to invest? Why is a Tiger going to invest? Then how do I scale the company? And if I don't scale the company, where's my impact? So therefore, the answer is, at a company level, as an impact investor, you have to be as disciplined when it comes to return. It's good for the company. But at a net portfolio level, where you have to do a number of things to encourage, and of course, media built the microfinance industry, not just in India, but around the world. They have done a lot of things at the industry level, at the portfolio level, where the returns have come down. We've had higher expenses, we've had longer holding periods, we've done more for the industry, we spend more money, grant capital, technical assistance, etc. So at a net level, net portfolio level, your returns are lower than Sequoia's. But company by company by company, your return should be as good as Sequoia or anyone else, because otherwise you won't get them. But the beauty of decarbonization is, you have any number of companies now where decarbonization is their business model. Like Blue Smart, like Battery Smart, like Duty Free. There's so many companies, Chai Point. So you'll say Chai Point. You're talking to me about a chai company, a chai store company, and you're telling me that they're a net zero company. Why? But they are. Because today, आज जब चाय बनती है तो कौन बनाता है भाई चाय? कोई छोटू होता है, वो कोयले पे या गैस पे चाय छान के बनाता है, देता है कि नहीं देता है? तो आप क्या उसमें उपयोग कर रहे हैं? फॉसिल फ्यूल का उपयोग हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है? और डेगची में आप चाय बना रहे हैं कि नहीं बना रहे? अब आप जब चाय पॉइंट को देखें तो चाय पॉइंट की चाय कहाँ बनती है? चाय पॉइंट की चाय जैसे इलेक्ट्रिक ऑटो रिक्शा है, उनकी इलेक्ट्रिक एक ब्रूइंग सिस्टम होती है, ब्रूइंग मशीन होती है, जस्ट छोटा सा जोल्ट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी आता है, चाय आपकी बनती है, फटाक से आपको हरी चाय मिल जाती है. ग्रीन टी, लिटरली ग्रीन टी. That's Chai Point. So a Chai Point is got decarbonization built into its business model. As an example, So let's look for those companies, let's scale them up, a recycling company, a EV company, a charging network company, a fintech company. There's so many companies that are doing stuff that is decarbonization at the core of it. Those are great impact investments. And by the way, you know, we talked about aviation earlier. What about Indigo? Isn't Indigo a high impact company? What about Airtel? What about Jio? Aren't they high impact companies? What about Infosys and TCS and Wipro? Aren't they high impact companies? The beautiful things for you all as business students, which is what I am very happy that I did an MBA, is business is a force for good. Business is a force for good. If we are going to develop this country and we are going to create great jobs for our people, as you saw, this is just 35 million government jobs. It's you who are going to do it. It's your companies, you as entrepreneurs, you as investors, you are going to do it. The private sector has to do it. I often ask people, आप बताएं कि अगर हम अर्थव्यवस्था देख रहे हैं तो उसमें से सरकार का हिस्सा कितना है और प्राइवेट सेक्टर का हिस्सा कितना है? आम जनता से पूछे सब बोलेंगे यार सरकार 70-80% है, प्राइवेट सेक्टर 20% है। सरकार ही सरकार है। It's actually the other way around. The Indian government, state plus center plus local, 25%. 75% is India's private sector. That's where the solutions are. Business is a force for good. You are a force for good. You got to think like that.
Now this is cricket season or cricket World Cup, 2020 World Cup, and because the students are used to dealing with MCQ, so now there's a googly form of an MCQ coming your way. Nikhil, if you can go ahead with your question. If you can prefer to back it. Question, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for the session. My question is that across your experience, with McKinsey, with Media, and Courage Capital, as of today, who do you think is the most committed and most serious about net zero emissions and sustainable development generally? And to follow up with that, with assuming hypothetically speaking that tomorrow, if we are actually shown the money, what would you want the youth of today? How would you want the youth of today to work towards net zero emissions?
Well, I think all good companies today, and the three companies I work for are very good companies. All companies today have said that they're going to focus on net zero and they're going to be net zero. McKinsey's done it, Avaya obviously is working in that regard, and Courage as well. All of them are working towards net zero. And I think for all of you, as you go into business, every company you're going to be working for is going to be committed to net zero. Tata Steel is committed to net zero. Every company is committed to net zero today. You will be committed, and you must be, and you will be committed to net zero. But there's something more you can do, which is, I think, and this is what the youth of India is doing phenomenally well right now, and we need to do more of it, is we've got to build the great companies of India. The Tata Steels, like Jamshed Tata ji built, like Indigo, like TCS, like Infosys, like Airtel. These are great companies. They are the companies that are building India. We are proud of them. They are our champions. That's what you can do. I'm sure there's enough talent in this room to go out and build some fantastic companies. So go out and do it. I think that's what the youth of India is doing. That's what the youth of India can do phenomenally well, and we have to.
So, the question now from a first year student who is going for internship probably in a consulting company, and on a topic that we as a skill meeting faculty find very difficult to address, but perhaps you can do that. Abbas, if you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, sir. Good evening, sir. Thanks for the talk again. So my question was regarding, as you said, you have worked in a consulting company, McKinsey, and as you know, most of the consulting companies are focused with growth of the clients. So isn't there a conflict at times, like when you are working for the growth of the clients, you have to work for the growth, and then there's this whole concept of, say, greener, like green development or stuff like that. So finally, since consulting companies or any companies are finally paid on how much growth you can go, so how do these conflicting things in a practical level go together?
So when you say growth, do you mean growth of the consulting company or growth of their client?
Growth of the client. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are, as I said, so many companies where decarbonization is their business model. When they grow, they decarbonize. So that's terrific. Let's help them and let's enable them to happen. And most other large companies are also committed to net zero now. I gave the example of Tata Steel, but most of the large companies in India are committed to decarbonization. And we have to find these pathways, and they are there, that will enable you to grow and decarbonize at the same time. That's the beauty of technology, right? So with technology we can decarbonize and grow at the same time. And that's the whole idea of the green frontier, which is let's push it so that, you know, we are increasing jobs, increasing wealth, increasing GDP, while at the same time making the world a better place. And we can do that if indeed we adopt green technology. So I don't see a contradiction. I see that virtually all companies now, virtually all good consultants now, are all trying to enable the world to get to net zero.
I think we have a question from Richard on poverty and development.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the insight. My question is actually around your work in India and how it was the sweet spot between the private and the development sector. Now, given that we're getting more such market-based solutions, be it development consulting or ESG, is this enough? Is the private sector, given that it takes, say, 100% from a community and then giving back 5%, is that going to be enough? Are market-based solutions enough? And or is this just some form of greenwashing?
That's a very cynical question. It's not greenwashing. There is always a balance between government, the private sector, and civil society itself. Right? Whereas Rohini Nilkani has often said, Sarkar, Samaj, और Bazaar, तीनों को काम करना है साथ, उन तीनों में balance होना चाहिए. So government has a role to play in terms of public goods, right? Like roads, like bridges, like highways, like health, like education. Those are public goods. 25% of our economy is government, and those are the ways in which we create public goods. Then private goods is what the private sector has. And then civil society also has a role to play, like an educational institution like XLRI. So in a vast, well-developed society, well-developed economy like India is, all of these three parts of our country have to play a very important role. One or the other is not enough. Government is not enough. We need the private sector. Private sector is not enough. We need government and civil society as well. So everybody has to play a role.
There is a question on the role of MSME. You talked about formal sector employment. So Bharadwaj, if you're there.
So last couple of questions.
Yeah. I think if I were to talk about all the questions, we'll run till late.
So my question is, we have lost to making corporates use sustainable practices, right? But then there are more than 8 million MSMEs in India. Like they're both key for economic development and net zero ambitions. How will we track and make laws for the MSMEs to follow sustainable practices?
So what has happened is, if you look at GST, in GST, smaller companies have become part of very large value chains or supply chains of larger companies. And just as you enforced GST and made sure that the smaller companies, your suppliers, are following those practices, many large companies will start to do that to help their suppliers, their partners that are in their value chain to get towards net zero as well. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, of course, as you know, comes through standards. So there are certain standards that are implemented in different industries, whether it's the steel industry or the electric vehicle industry, which you will have to follow. And that, of course, leads you to decarbonization as well. And then there is a carbon price as well. In India, the carbon price is largely very high excise taxes on fossil fuels. So you want to economize on the usage of fossil fuels, and therefore that price signal also makes a difference. In other countries, like in the European Union, now they have a discovered price for carbon, which is $80 a ton. So it's quite high now. And so that's leading people to conserve on carbon emissions, etc. So a combination of these measures, large companies helping, obviously, the high price you're paying for fossil fuels, plus carbon taxes and so on, can get you to a point where, your MSMEs also start to follow those principles.
There was a question on the private bill that you brought from the parliament. So by Shashwat, you can ask that question.
So thank you, sir, for the talk. So my question is, we all know that private bills have anyway been diluting since the last it was passed from the both houses was the 1970s. So bringing private bills in terms of climate change and such a sensitive issue, do you think it's a it's a way that government is trying to just show that, okay, we are there, but we're not very serious about it.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not government. It is a private member bill. And when you do private member bills, and I've done many of them, it's to show a pathway. It's to show that there is a way of getting through some very naughty issues. Right? That there is a way in which you can craft legislation. I'm a lawmaker. I'm not a member of the government. I'm a lawmaker. So I like to do it and I do it. In fact, let me ask you a question. Kalyanji, this was the question you asked. So we were just having a cup of coffee before we came here, and there were some students there, Kalyanji was there, and I asked a question. Just let me ask you one. What is the role of an MP? What is the role of an MP? Does anyone want to answer? Role of an MP? Bataiye.
The role of an MP in my...
Take the mic.
The role of an MP, in my understanding, is to represent their constituency or their electoral district that they come from and put forth, serve as the voice of the people who have voted for them and even those who have not voted.
So then my job is to sit in parliament and give speeches. Is that my job? That's the voice of the people, right?
They even argue and put forth the issues.
Okay, chaliye, that's one. Aap bataye.
To fulfill the aspirations of people of
their constituency. So आप कह रहे हैं local development.
Yes.
Local development. आप बताएं.
Make law. It's a legislature, and he's a legislator in principle.
So now we are on to something. If you ask people in the audience, and I asked Kalyanji, who's a professor of public policy, there was 3 or 4 students. I don't want to embarrass them. There were 3 or 4 students who were also there. Every single one of them. And I'm not blaming anyone, not even professors of public policy. I'm not blaming anyone. But every single person will see the role of an MP is कि भाई क्षेत्रीय विकास. अरे भाई गली नली बनाना नहीं आपका काम. अगर वहां सड़क या पुलिया खराब हो गई तो वो आप ही का काम है, बनवाइए. कहीं किसी की हादसा हो गई है, दुर्घटना हो गई है, तो आप जाकर उसको ठीक करवाइए. सदर अस्पताल में ठीक नहीं चल रहा, आप जाइए उसको ठीक करवाइए. यही तो है ना काम. आपके सांसद का काम यही है. क्षेत्रीय विकास, गली नली, सड़क, पुलिया. कहीं भी अगर किसान को दिक्कत हो गई है तो आप सिंचाई करवाइए. कानूनी व्यवस्था गड़बड़ा गई है तो उसको चरमरा गई है तो उसको ठीक करवाइए. यही तो आपका काम है. आप सांसद हैं, क्षेत्रीय विकास आपका काम है. और मैं जहां भी जाता हूं, जिस भी जनसभा में करता हूं, या बड़ी बड़ी जनसभा नहीं, आपके सामने भी ये बातचीत जब होती है तो आप लोग भी यही कहते हैं क्षेत्रीय विकास है आपका काम. अभी भी लोग नोट कर रहे हैं क्षेत्रीय विकास. करेक्ट. कहीं कोई गड़बड़ी हो तो फोन करो अपने सांसद को, उससे करवाओ. मैं फिर सबसे यही पूछता हूं, अगर ये बात होती तो हम लोग दिल्ली में करते क्या? अगर हम लोग 8 महीने दिल्ली में हैं, 6 महीने जो हम लोग सदन में बैठे हुए हैं, 2 महीने हम लोग जैसे सोमवार को मंडे को वित्त समिति की बैठक है, वित्त समिति की बैठक में कमेटी रूम में हम लोग बैठकर चर्चाएं हम लोग करें, तो हम लोग कर क्या रहे हैं भाई? क्षेत्रीय विकास दिल्ली में कहां से होगा? अगर क्षेत्रीय विकास करना है तो आप प्रखंड कार्यालय जाइए, आप जिला कार्यालय में बैठिए, डीसी एसपी के बगल में बैठिए, दनादन उनको फोन करिए, काम करवाइए. क्षेत्रीय विकास करिए आप.
That's how most MPs are getting votes. They seek votes through that.
आप लोग जाने, जनता आप हैं, हमको सेवक है. हमको सेवक है. आप गली नली चाहते तो हम गली नली बनाएंगे. आप सड़क पुलिया चाहते तो हम सड़क पुलिया बनवाएंगे. जो आपकी इच्छा माने तो आप हैं. लेकिन there is a thing called the Constitution of India, right? Isn't there such a thing called the Constitution of India? What does the Constitution of India say that an MP should do? Should the MP be, maybe आप कह रहे हैं कि गलती उनकी है क्योंकि वो उस बहाने आपसे वोट्स मांग रहे हैं, लेकिन आप भी तो वही चाहते हैं. हमारे पास और कोई उपाय ही क्या है? आपको गली नली ही चाहिए, आपको कानून चाहिए, प्राइवेट मेंबर बिल चाहिए, आपको बोले क्या प्राइवेट मेंबर बिल? उन्होंने ही पूछ लिया. प्राइवेट मेंबर बिल बनाकर फायदा क्या? मेरी गली बनी, मेरा शौचालय बना, ट्रैफिक चल रही है जमशेदपुर में, इतनी जबरदस्त ट्रैफिक है, तो उसको आपने नहीं देखा. आप जाके कानून बना रहे हैं वहां दिल्ली में. ये क्या मजाक बना रखा है? But friends, the story is very different. The constitutional responsibility, संवैधानिक जिम्मेवारी आपके सांसद की है कि देश के कानून और देश की नीतियां, देश का बजट आप बनाएं। देश क्षेत्र का नहीं। क्षेत्र के लिए तो आपके मुखिया हैं, आपके वार्ड पार्षद हैं, आपके विधायक हैं। बिजली, सड़क, पानी, स्वास्थ्य, शिक्षा, कृषि क्षेत्र, ये सब जो है ये आपके स्टेट लिस्ट में है, ये आपके सेंट्रल लिस्ट में नहीं है ये सब। और जो पैसे आते हैं वो पैसे आपके सांसद को थोड़ा ना मिलते हैं, वो तो आपकी राज्य सरकार, आपके मुख्यमंत्री को मिलते हैं कि वो क्षेत्रीय विकास करें। और संविधान के अनुसार आपके सांसदों को जिम्मेवारी ये दी गई है कि आप जाके देश के कानून बनाइए, देश की नीति बनाइए। लद्दाख में अगर हमारा सिपाही खड़ा है और उसके पास सही वस्त्र नहीं है, सही हथियार नहीं है, तो वो मुखिया जी आपको दिलवाएंगे क्या? मुखिया दिलवाएंगे उस सिपाही को? कौन दिलवाएगा? आपके सांसद नहीं दिलवाएंगे। अगर नेट जीरो बिल बनाना है, उस पर चर्चा करनी है, तो कौन करेगा? मुखिया जी करेंगे। किसी को तो करना है ना। तो साथियों, ये एक बहुत जरूरी बात है। आप नागरिक हैं, आपको बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेवारी आपको मिलने वाली है कि आप देश को चलाइएगा। और अगर आप लोग इन सब विषयों पर रुचि नहीं रखते, अगर आप लोगों को इसके बारे में जानकारी नहीं है कि आपका देश चलता कैसे है, देश की सरकार कौन है, आप लोग सब मुझसे गवर्नमेंट के प्रश्न पूछें। मैं गवर्नमेंट हूं? मैं तो गवर्नमेंट हुई नहीं। सरकार तो देखिए तीन स्तंभ है, 4 स्तंभ है सरकार के, देश के। एक कार्यपालिका यानी एग्जीक्यूटिव, एक न्यायपालिका यानी जुडिशियरी, और एक विधायिका यानी लेजिस्लेटिव ब्रांच, और फिर मीडिया। ये तो अलग अलग स्तंभ है ना। There are 4 different branches of government. So don't confuse 4 different branches of the state and recognize why you're electing an MP. You're electing an MP to make law. To make law. It's not a trivial matter. It's a very, very serious question as to how to make law. Right now in my committee, in the Standing Committee on Finance, we have the Competition Law of India. That has been totally restructured, amended in multiple different places, as it should be. Because it's after 15 years that we are amending competition law. 15 years. The last time competition law was amended was in 2007. That regulates the competitive behavior of every company in India. What is anti-competitive practice and what is not anti-competitive practice? How do I think about a merger? Is that going to be competitive, pro-competition or anti-competition? Now, would you rather have your MP thinking about competition law, or would you rather have him thinking about गली और गली? आप बताएं। आप मालिक हैं, आप खुद सोचिए। आप अपने सांसदों से क्या चाहते हैं? उस कंपटीशन लॉ पे चर्चा हो, उस कंपटीशन लॉ का अध्ययन हो कि गली, नली, सड़क, पुलिया, किसान क्षेत्र पर काम करें। वो तो आपके मुखिया और विधायक को सौंप ही दिया गया है, राज्य सरकार को सौंप ही दिया गया है। तो आप अपने सांसद के पीछे क्यों पड़े? और अगर आप सांसद के पीछे पड़ेंगे तो सांसद वोट के लिए क्या करेगा? वो भी गली नली में लग जाएगा, वो भी शिलान्यास में लगे रहेगा। शिलम पट्टी पे जाकर आज ही मैंने किया, रोज ही मैं करता हूं, क्योंकि आप लोग सब लोग चाहते हैं कि शिलम पट्टी करें, दिखाएं कि भाई आपने ये काम किया, वो काम किया, क्षेत्रीय विकास के। एक विडंबना, दुविधा है। एक हम लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़ी समस्या है कि हम लोगों को देश में सरकार को कैसे चलाना है, और सरकार अगर चलाना है तो वो जनता के मार्फत ही चल सकती है, जनता के तहत ही चल सकती है, जनता के मांगों के आधार पे ही चल सकती है। इसलिए हम लोग क्या करें? हम लोग तो आपके गुलाम, हम लोग तो आपके सेवक। लेकिन मैं आप सबसे, और मैं इसी के साथ अपनी बात आज समाप्त करूंगा, विनती प्रार्थना यही करूंगा कि जब तक नागरिक जागरूक नहीं है, until our citizenry is not sophisticated and aware of how government works, government will not work well. Government will not work well because I only have 24 hours a day. And if I have to think about competition law, do you want me to do competition law very hastily and put in a clause that for you people as business people later on you're going to say, why the hell did they do that? Why is there so much bureaucracy and red tape in India? Why? Because हम लोग गली नली का काम करते हैं। So it is all a function of what you want. The country is in your hands. You decide what your public representatives do. You decide what our businesses do. You decide how we progress to the future. But it is my job, not just as a politician, but my job as an older person, is to speak to all of you, talk to all of you, and just tell you what the choices are and what the implications are. That's all I can do. That's all I can do, that's all I have to offer. At the end of the day, you have to decide how you want to live your life, where you want to live your life, and what will happen in this country. That responsibility is yours. Each of you will collectively, आप लोग एक इस पे निर्णय आप लोग लीजिएगा, जो आपका निर्णय होगा वही हमारा देश होगा। और मेरी जिम्मेवारी है कि आप लोगों को बताएं कि आप लोगों के ही तहत, आप लोगों के ही कहने पे ये देश चलेगा। ठीक है? थैंक यू, आप सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Sir, I don't think I will be able to do justice to express my gratitude to you, especially what we have just witnessed, all of us, the feelings, the emotions, the raw emotions that are there. Thank you so much for taking out time and giving us insights, not just into sustainability, but what goes into investing, how these laws and the duty of a member of parliament and what they're supposed to do, and how we as voters are in the control of our destiny. Thanks a ton, sir. We look forward to having you again interacting with our students more, and I hope all of you have taken as you step into the career post MBA, you will use these insights shared by Shishiraji and use in your career. And yes, thank you so much. Have a pleasant evening.